When is the right time to give a kid their first phone?
Oh, it's a big one, that's for sure. A real question for this day and age, isn't it? No easy answers either. Though it's interesting, so many of these articles, they all land somewhere around 12 to 14, but like we always do, it's not about the number itself, it's more about the why.
Yeah, and it's such a different world now than when we were growing up. Back then, not having a phone wasn't even a thing, you know? Now it's like they're everywhere. Kids today, they're dealing with a whole different ball game socially.
Exactly. That's at the heart of it, I think. It's not just a phone, it's like this, I don't know, a social key or something, especially around that 12 to 14 age. Middle school, new friends, maybe even more freedom, going places without parents as much.
Oh, and speaking of that, one article mentioned like 70% of parents, they felt better, calmer even, once their kid had a phone. So it's not just the kids, right? It's the parents too, knowing you can reach them if you need to.
Oh, absolutely. Safety, peace of mind, that's huge for parents. And tech, phones specifically, seem to offer that. But what's interesting, that same article, it pointed out how that safety net, it can sometimes clash with a kid's need to be more independent, you know?
It's that push and pull, isn't it? You want them safe, but you got to let them become their own person too. Like you said, a real balancing act.
And that's where the whole brain development side of things gets really interesting. Teenagers, they're wired to push boundaries, try new things, figure out who they are, right? A phone can play into that, let them connect, explore, but it's tricky.
Because too much of a good thing, especially at that age.
Can really backfire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're seeing it already, cyberbullying, phone addiction, even messing with sleep, all tied to too much screen time. So the question becomes less about when they get a phone, more like how do we prepare them to use it well?
Right. So less about the phone, more about, I don't know, what kind of digital person they become. And that's where I think a lot of parents, myself included, we start to feel lost.
Right, like that saying, the tool's only as good as the person using it, you know? And you hit on something important with these articles, how parents, they're in uncharted territory here. No instruction manual for this digital age, especially with how fast apps and all that stuff changes.
It's true. I remember reading this one study. They compared like kids' brains, digital natives, they called them, versus people like us who got into tech later on. Totally different. The kids, they process things so fast, multitasking, but that also makes them more, what's the word, distractible,
Yeah.
instant gratification, all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where those parental controls, the guidance, it's not about being like super strict. It's more like think training wheels on a bike. You wouldn't just hand a kid a bike and say, go for it. You'd start slow, maybe even run alongside them at first, then let them go more and more as they get the hang of it.
Perfect example. And you just reminded me of when an expert mentioned basic phones as a starting point.
Right. That stuck with me too. Easing them in, not just throwing them in the deep end with a smartphone, just calls, texts. They learn those basic communication skills, how to be responsible with replying without all the pressure of social media, the constant notifications.
And honestly, even as adults, right? Like, I get overwhelmed by all that sometimes. Can't imagine being a kid with that constantly.
Exactly. Shows how important it is that we model good habits too.
Yeah.
If we're glued to our phones all the time, that sends a message. But if we have phone-free times at home, if we make an effort to just talk to each other, those are the important lessons.
It makes me think of that thing, family media plans. Some articles mention it. I've heard of those.
Oh yeah, for sure. Such a good tool. Basically, the whole family talks about, how you want to use tech, what the boundaries are. Everyone's on the same page about what's okay and what's not. And the key is you include the kids in that.
So it's not just us, the parents, making all the rules. It's more of a collaboration.
Exactly. When kids feel heard, when they understand the why behind the rules, they're way more likely to go along with it and actually learn those good habits.
Makes sense. And I bet that kind of openness, that helps with some of the tougher stuff we talked about before, like if they see something online that worries them or cyberbullying, if they're already comfortable talking to us.
Huge. That open communication, that's key.
Yeah.
And not just waiting for them to come to us. It's about us proactively giving them the knowledge they need to handle those tough situations, like online privacy, how to use social media responsibly, what to do if someone's being mean online. Those are all conversations we need to be having.
It's almost like we're talking about a whole different set of skills they need now, right? Not just the usual stuff, digital skills, how to handle all this online stuff. Wasn't something we had to learn growing up, but for them, it's huge.
Totally. And it's not just about keeping them safe online either, important as that is. It's about how they can actually use all this tech in a good way, to be creative, make real connections, learn new things.
And you know, it's fun. This all kind of comes back to that social pressure thing we talked about.
Okay.
Because it's tough, right? It's not just what we think as parents. It's also what their friends are doing, what's considered normal.
Oh, for sure. It's a huge factor.
Well-
And that's where those family media plans, those can be so helpful. Because, I mean, it's one thing to say no phones at dinner, but if all their friends are allowed on their phones 24/7, that's a tough battle.
Like you're trying to build your own little world within your family with those rules and all, hoping it's strong enough to, I don't know, hold up against the outside pressure.
Exactly. And it's not always easy, but it's about that balance, like we said.
Yeah.
Not cutting them off completely, but not letting tech take over their lives either.
Raising them to be aware, I guess, responsible about it all, which honestly, something we could all probably work on, right?
100%.
Yeah.
I think we can actually learn a lot watching how kids use tech. And maybe more importantly, showing them how we use it in a good way, setting that example.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, it's not about the perfect age for a phone, is it? It's bigger than that. It's about how we deal with technology overall as a family, talking about it, setting those boundaries, being there to help them figure it all out.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Hmm.
And if you take away one thing from all this, let it be this. This world today, it's all information overload, instant this, instant that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the best thing we can give our kids is the ability to just unplug sometimes. Be present. Have those real-life conversations. Know who they are without needing the internet to tell them.
Now, that is something to think about. It's not about raising kids who are just good with tech. It's about raising good people, period. Thanks for being with us for this deep dive.